Hello and welcome to another episode of Eon Talks. In this series, we're exploring augmented reality and the applications it can provide to businesses and to enhance a user's experience. My name's Pete, and today I'm absolutely delighted to be joined by my colleagues James and Jack from Eon Visual Media, who are going to be helping to explain how augmented reality can be accessed both via a user and from a business perspective. Guys, welcome to the show.
Hi again.
Glad to be back again, James.
Lovely, it's a pleasure to be back. Thanks for having me.
Amazing. And Jack, first time on the show, are you excited to be here?
Yeah, looking forward to it.
Amazing. Cool, so to kick things off, Jack, since you weren't here for our first episode, I'm going to fire a question towards you. And in our last episode, myself and James were touching upon how augmented reality is becoming a lot more common these days and used a lot more both by businesses and by consumers. So I was wondering if you could maybe explain why this might be the case.
A couple of things really. I think over the last couple of years, people have been able to access AR in different ways. So typically it'd be a bespoke app that would have to be downloaded. But nowadays there's other ways to access it via your operating system or web AR. And both of those can be sort of accessed by QR codes, which have seen a resurgence in the last couple of years. So you're now having a real simple way to access that current asset, which people are aware of and use day to day in their life, like QR codes through coronavirus have been used on all the track and trace apps. So people are aware of that you can scan that, and it helps get that user across that first threshold.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I can certainly relate to that, as I'm sure most people in the UK and all around the world can right now. Just the scanning the QR code just as you're entering into buildings to keep in line with NHS and COVID regulations. James, did you have anything to add to that as to why augmented reality is becoming increasingly popular?
No, I think in terms of popularity, I think Jack's covered it. I think we sort of covered a little bit in the first episode as well, where we talked about augmented reality has become a lot more accessible through smartphones. So most applications of augmented reality these days are delivered via a smartphone. So you use a smartphone, everybody's got a lot of power in their pockets, and that's been a way of getting augmented reality to the masses.
Excellent. Yeah, so Jack, you sort of touched upon it there. It sounds like from what you suggested there, accessing augmented reality is literally just as easy as downloading an app to your phone.
Yeah, even easier. It's clicking a link. It's scanning a QR code. You don't need to do that app anymore. That's kind of the benefit of it.
Yeah, I think that has been a barrier to AR over the last 4 or 5 years. Is that most people have started accessing it through their smartphone, but historically, prior to very recently, you've had to download an app, and that can be a barrier. So if you've got a brand's created an experience, the user sees that there's an experience there, but then they've got to download an app, they maybe don't have an internet connection. It's a barrier, albeit some would argue it's a small barrier, it's a barrier to augmented reality. But as Jack's alluded to now, it's getting simpler, and a lot like Jack just mentioned, QR codes have got simpler. If you remember, a few years ago you would need to download a third-party app to scan a QR code. These days you don't. It's built into the operating system of your smartphone, so iOS and Android can all scan QR codes natively now just by launching the camera app. And I think that's where augmented reality will go. But yeah, recently we've been exploring web AR as well as another form of web AR. It's still delivered via the web, but the actual augmented reality experiences comes with the operating system, so you don't need to download any third-party applications to experience AR.
Amazing. So it sounds from a user's perspective, it's never been easier for them to immediately get their hands on an augmented reality experience.
Yeah, no, definitely, and give some fluid to how that user then engages with it. So if you go into a museum and there's some AR at the museum, you don't have to have downloaded the app before you got there, which would stop people doing it, because once you get out and about, you run into issues with data, access, Wi-Fi, battery life and all that stuff, whereas if you don't have to do all that, then it removes more than barriers and makes it easy to do on the fly. And the thing is that it's going to get to that point where most things are in some way, you can do something AR with most things, so not having to download a million apps to do a million things to every venue you go to, or if you've just been able to use the common technologies built into your phone, are definitely going to be beneficial.
Absolutely, yeah, I completely agree with that. So we touched upon it just in your answers from there. talking about QR codes, and so like that's usually is a very popular way for people to access augmented realities and the features within that. But am I right in believing that it doesn't always necessarily have to be a QR code that you scan to gain access to these features?
No, QR code's just one way of doing it, and it's one way of doing it without the user having to do a lot of things. So they don't have to download the app. Something we've seen a lot is links, because if you're already on a device and you see something you want to engage with, if you ain't got another device to scan it, how are you going to scan a QR code on a digital screen? So links work equally the same, web addresses. So it's using all these things people are familiar with and comfortable with, but taking them to a new exciting bit of content. So it's really making the experience user-friendly as possible.
Excellent. James, do you have anything to add to that?
Oh.
Excellent. I think quite a common way I've seen people, and I may have used this example in the previous episode, but I know there's quite a lot of packaging labels that do use augmented reality as well. So I know that sometimes the trigger may actually be an image itself. So I was wondering if you could maybe elaborate a little bit further on that.
Yeah, I suppose the QR code is a way of actually launching a piece of AR. Once you actually get into the AR, there's different ways of triggering the experience. So, like you've mentioned, image recognition is quite common. So scanning an image and augmenting something, and usually the experience will track that image as well. So if you're scanning a poster, whatever you augment out of that poster will track that poster. So as you move your camera or move your device, the augmented reality experience is sort of stuck to the poster or whatever it is that you're augmenting. So images is one trigger. GPS is another trigger, which we mentioned Pokemon Go in our first episode, and that was GPS. So you can augment something based on a GPS location.
Environment and surface detection, so that's your IKEA Place app, so it establishes where the walls, the floor are in your room, and you can put things on that attached to that surface so that when you walk around it stays in that place, it's identified that surface.
And face, so facial triggers. We mentioned Snapchat in the first episode as well, but that's using your face to trigger an augmented reality experience. And another one is object recognition, which is fairly newish, not really mainstream yet. IKEA do use it, where you can scan an everyday object. Let's say, for example, one of our office chairs, we scan that with the IKEA app with object recognition. It'll recognise that it's a chair, and it'll serve up other similar chairs that are available in its catalogue. So object recognition is another augmented reality trigger.
That's amazing, yeah. It just sounds, there are so many different ways in which businesses can apply augmented reality, not just from a marketing stance, but even just like from a practical day-to-day operations way. It sounds like it's a really great way to enhance the user's perspective and experience whilst using their devices, which kind of ties me on nicely to our next question, which is, it sounds like augmented reality is both incredibly accessible from a user's perspective and incredibly easy to use. But from a business's perspective, if they were looking to get into developing augmented reality, an app or an experience, is it just as easy for them to do that themselves?
It's an interesting one. That my first thing when people are talking about creating experiences is what's your experience and what already exists. Like, I think the key is to not have to create everything from scratch. So if you're a manufacturer, if you've got products, if you've got packaging, if you've got anything where there's a 3D file that already exists, it's a relatively streamlined workflow to get that into AR. 3D animations for mode of actions or for device videos, the 3D files are already there. So make it part of your strategy, make it easier. When you've designed team, when your agency are developing that, make them aware that you're also going to want to develop this, maybe not today, but in the future, and it will help remove some of them barriers that would stop most people experimenting with AR.
Yeah, just the only thing I would add I'd say it's definitely creating augmented reality experiences getting easier, sort of in parallel to how easy it is to access for consumers. Actually creating them as an agency is easier. The tools that are being made available to create AR experiences are there's a lot more of them, so there's a lot more choice, and yeah, they're getting better and better all the time. So actually creating AR experiences can be quite simple, obviously. As Jack said, it depends what that AR experience is, what you're trying to achieve, and what consumer needs you're trying to meet. But yeah, there are a whole host of different options now, which in itself makes it easier to figure out the best one for any business or any brand.
Brilliant.
We had an interesting revelation the last couple of weeks. I think we typically used to look at augmented reality experiences as a development project. But more and more so, because of the advances in the pieces of kit used to create it, it's more of a creative project. We're giving it to more of our creatives. It's coming away from the dev team because it's about creating an engaging experience which is probably more involved. It looks the part, it works and functions, but also makes someone want to engage with it. So it has that little spark in it. And yeah, the software is making that easy to sit with our creative bods.
Brilliant. And whilst I've got you both here on this episode, it would be great, because I know in a future episode we're going to be starting to examine a lot of case studies where augmented reality has been used by businesses to help promote the products and services in very different and unique ways. So whilst I've actually got you both here, it would be great, what examples particularly stand out in your mind and in like really clever and innovative ways in which businesses have adapted and used AR as part of their day-to-day operations?
I'll jump in first. The best experience I've had with AR was when I was in Amsterdam. I went to a museum, which the name of the museum has gone from my head, but every piece of art in the gallery was augmented in some way. And they had some really famous pieces in there, some Liechtenstein pieces in there, some Banksy stuff. And you could hold your phone over and it brought that painting to life, it brought that sculpture to life. It caged this big pink bear which was in the grounds of the museum, and it added stuff. And what it did was make me spend more than 15 minutes walking around the museum. It made me spend an hour. So it was added that extra level of engagement, that added value content, which makes me remember that. And it also, I'd want to do an experience like that again.
Yeah, gone are the days where you might need to carry around a little box where it would provide a little description of every exhibit in there. Maybe it's very likely that everyone is carrying a smart device with them these days, so maybe gone are the days where you'd have to carry around a pair of headphones attached to an audio speaker provided by the museum. Maybe it's literally as simple now as downloading an app via the museum and then being able to use AR to enhance that experience of the people there. James, how about yourself?
Yeah, I mean, there's some really good use cases, and I think 3 of the ones that I mentioned in the first episode are worth mentioning again in terms of good use cases. But Pokemon, I thought, got it right with Pokemon Go. I thought that was a really good. It's obviously gaming related, but did a fantastic job. There was, what was the other ones? The IKEA were one of the first to market, but I think their business lends itself really well to augmented reality and allowing people to try different pieces of furniture in their home. I thought that was really good. I think Snapchat do a good job. It's quite gimmicky, and a lot of people don't even realise that it's AR, but it's kind of cool, and it's got a lot of people using it and becoming familiar with augmented reality. One that I really like though is probably a bit left field, but there was one called Enter the Room. Not many people might have seen it, but it was an app developed by a charity, and it was to raise awareness of warfare in urban places. And basically what it did was just immerse you in this really powerful, hard-hitting story about warfare in urban spaces and how it impacted young children in particular. So it was a really powerful way of telling that story. It really immersed you into the story and really hit you quite hard and prompted you really to donate to the charity and help in any way that you can. But putting that into a context for businesses, I think basically all businesses are trying to do is tell stories. All brands are trying to do is tell stories, and AR is a way of telling that story in a much more immersive and powerful way. So yeah.
So Jack, do you have any more examples of how some of your favourite augmented reality case studies?
Yeah, I do. One AR asset we really like is Insight Heart, and we see it as a bit of a benchmark for us in particular. It's a healthcare app, and it allows you to get inside the body and see how the body works. It's specifically focused around the heart, and it gives you a load of detail into different heart diseases and heart problems, and you get to see the blood go around the body. It's really quite a good experience. And we like it because it shows the next step of some of the work we typically do for our customers. So we typically do a lot of 3D mode of action videos, and we see AR experiences as the next step of that. How can you create more engaging sales content in a similar way and in a similar fashion, because it's 3D in mode of action because you can't show it in real life, and similarly you can't go in a real body. But what this does is allows you to sort of get a body in front of you and engage with that a bit more than you can on a video. All of the videos are really smart, look the part, do the job. How can we improve it? And it's put it in front of you, having someone walk around it, engage with it. Insight Heart is also a multi-user experience. So typically AR is one person, you're looking through one device and you see one version of an asset. Whereas Insight Heart, you can share that, so you can all look at the same model at the same time, which really helps in terms of educational and training settings, where you might want all the kids in a class to see the same thing happening, especially when you're trying to explain what, say, a heart attack looks like. They all need to be experiencing what that looks like. Same for training, and same for e-detailing for sales as well.
Yeah, it's a really good educational tool about heart conditions, and it makes it really visual using augmented reality, and I think that's probably the key, is AR can be a really visual way of getting inside the body and doing all the things that we've done traditionally with 3D animation and traditional video content. But I also think Insight Heart is a really good intro to our future thinking, which is essentially revolves around digital twins. So being able to see our own health, visualize our own health through augmented reality. So have a digital twin where you want to see what's wrong with you, or you want to find out how to solve a pain that you've got, i.e. the mode of action of a particular treatment. You can actually visualize what happens and how that product works through augmented reality. I think that's going to be quite powerful and something that we'll probably all do at some point in the future.
Yeah, well, just to add to the Insight Heart is you can sync your own health data to it. So you can sync your last workout or your current heart rate, and it will visualise that in front of you. So yeah, them steps to becoming an AR twin are definitely in the process.
Yeah, and I think we're going to capture, and we already do capture, quite a lot of health information about ourselves through wearables already. So through our watch, like Jack said, our heart rate, but we're also capturing other stuff, how much we sleep without even realising, how many steps we take in a day. And I think other wearables that are released are going to start to capture more and more health data, and that essentially is where we think this digital twin is going to go. So we're going to capture all of that data and we're going to show you what that looks like using augmented reality.
Yeah, I can imagine, because I'm one of many who uses a fitness tracker, and I track my data after going to the gym or going out for a run, and I think it does produce a lot of data where, quite honestly, I don't know what that means. But I mean, I can imagine that to actually see that simulated in an augmented reality experience on a system like that, to actually see what physical effects it has on the body, that would be a really great way to actually visually see that and what effects that does have on people. Well, I think so far we've managed to look into augmented reality and explore how it works, how it compares to virtual reality. And I think now we're starting to dive into exactly how businesses and users are currently using augmented reality. So I think that'll tie us in nicely to our next episode, where we're going to start looking at some more specific case studies and how businesses have used it so far. But if you want to find out more information about augmented reality, check out the Eon Visual Media website, and also make sure you check out our social media platforms for more episodes from this series. Thanks very much for coming on the show, guys. It's been absolutely amazing having you on here and talking about AR. But until next time, I've been Pete.
I've been James.
I've been Jack.
And this has been Eon Talks. See you next time.